I have PTSD from being assaulted by people like you. And by that I mean insecure assholes. I'm not a racist, in case that's where you're gonna oh, racist trans woman attacks me on sidewalk. You assaulted me on the sidewalk and then you called the cops on me.
I think I see lights coming down.
Good. It's taking so long. I looked better than you, and you couldn't handle it because you have internalized misogyny, internalized femphobia, internalized homophobia. You're an angry young lady. You're an angry young woman, and I really wish we could be friends. But that does not give you the right to hit me on the sidewalk, which is what you did. You assaulted me, ma'am. Yeah, please.
Yep, that crazy racist person is Clint's girlfriend.
Oh, no.
And they came together through their mutual hatred and despise of black women. Welcome back.
That's a rough way to start a show. My goodness.
we gotta get it in. We gotta do as best as we can here. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. My name is Luke Radowski here of the bestpoliticalshow.com, and we will be going live for the next 2 hours discussing all the latest and craziest news developing right now. As of course, there's a lot of things to specifically talk about, as of course there are major protests now unfolding right now in Washington, D.C. that give us Summer of Love 2.0 vibes. The FBI is being questioned by Congress, giving us some very interesting details about the assassin, as Biden will soon be addressing the nation in about a few hours from now. So lots of things developing, lots of things breaking right now. We'll be talking about it here on this independent media broadcast for the next 2 hours. So please make sure to share this broadcast with your friends and family members. It is more imperative than ever, as of course YouTube is giving us the business. They definitely do not like us. They definitely do not like this channel. They don't like what we do. And you guys supporting us really does make the biggest difference. And sharing this video really does mean a lot to us. So we greatly appreciate everyone who, of course, does that, as you could also participate in the conversation. And one quick and easy way to do that is, of course, through LukeUnfiltered.com. We will be going to callers of LukeUnfiltered.com in about an hour and a half from now. So you could be that caller, you could call in, you could be a part of the conversation just by signing up to LukeUnfiltered.com. As of course, members also get the ability to get a lot of really cool things like tickets to the Bitcoin conference, which we gave out thousands of dollars worth just to members of LukeUnfiltered.com. You can still get your tickets, promo code WRC, but if you remember, you got like $700 tickets for free. So that's just one of the perks of being a member of LukeUnfiltered.com. We also will, of course, be reading your super chats. We prefer you guys use mysuperchat.com. It's our website. It's linked in the description, as of course it allows your text to actually show up on screen. And also, more importantly, it only gives us a 3% service charge. Now, it looks like I might be having some difficulties with my camera. I'm going to be fixing that. As I fix that, we are joined today by Marcel Klein. Marcel, for the people who don't know you, who are you and how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm a success coach, and I'm probably the best hypnotist on the planet. So, I'm pretty excited to talk about my perspective on what's going on here with, everything from the Trump assassination and what the government might be doing, so people have some perspective and they see the world through a different lens. And, my goal today is to really maybe educate them that things aren't so black and white.
Yeah, you reached out to me and you're like, this is SIRHAN 2.0. 2.0. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And if anyone would know how to, of course, hypnotize or convince people to do something, it would be probably you. We hypnotized Clint here last time you were here. I have to sadly report that your hypnosis of him didn't work.
It's just 'cause I'm stubborn.
He was supposed to stop douche fluting, and he was supposed to go to the gym more.
Oh, I go.
But the only thing that really happened was that he went to meth, and instead of going to gym, he goes to male saunas right now. So I guess it partly
Fake
worked.
news. This is fake
I guess
news.
it partly worked, right, Clint?
This is fake news. Fact check false. This man's a liar.
All right, you guys take it away because I'm going to try to fix my camera manually. Go ahead.
If the
Clint
camera's on me.
Russell in the house as well.
Yo, at Liberty Lock Pod on X. If you want to support my work, you can subscribe there. Got 155K of you savages. I appreciate you guys. Also, about 103 subscribers on YouTube away from 20K. So I'd appreciate if you guys go subscribe to Liberty Lockdown. And we've got Steph on the buttons.
Hi everyone, this is Steph. We are Change, pushing the buttons. Super excited to get into it.
And we're live. Let's go. I don't know what's going on with Luke's camera. We had issues last night, so if you guys can bear with us for a moment. Before we get Luke back on camera, what was the telltale sign that made you think that this guy may be
We'll get into that in a little bit, Clint. Of course. Hold on.
I'm trying to buy
time.
Well,
let's buy time
I was
with
gonna
what
say,
we're
I guess
specifically
Clint-
talking about.
Clint's results probably, indicate that he wouldn't be the best subject
exactly
for that.
That's right, Fed. Stay away from me. I'm not going to do what you want. All right.
He's not a good MKUltra.
I'm very stubborn.
Yeah.
You didn't have you're too old and you have a different background.
See?
They like to prey on younger people.
That's right.
Yeah.
Too old, and I also have the background of being a savage.
As of course, right now it looks like Steph. Don't go to me. Let's go to, of course, a picture of me, which is also
I
just
can,
as representative.
I
But
can give
before
you my webcam. It's an
that
idea.
might potentially work here, as of course, right now we have new video footage coming out of Washington, D.C., highlighting a lot of protests. Now, we told you, because we talked to Jorge here just a few days ago, who's there on the ground right now, that people are expecting a lot of very serious protests in Washington, D.C., protesting, of course, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that just addressed the U.S. government. Here's a clip of what's developing right now in the making of this video in Washington, D.C. As it looks like pepper spray is being used, protesters are kind of moving forward. So far, it looks like there are minor kind of clashes between police officers and a group of protesters that are walking forward near them. Police officers told them to stop. They didn't. And then they, of course, just deployed the pepper spray there that you see in this particular video, as a lot of people are saying that this is going to be one of many protests, especially coming to the Democratic National Convention, as it looks like a flashbang was just kind of thrown there, or a firework. As we know, some left-wing protesters also use fireworks at these protests. As I think this is the kind of beginning sign towards larger, major protests coming here to the United States, as the DNC is going to be just in a few days from now in Chicago, where a lot of people expect things to get absolutely wild and crazy. What do you guys make of the protest happening right now surrounding Benjamin Netanyahu?
I'm not surprised, but I will say I am a little bit surprised that they're this activated, simply because it's my belief that the 2020 riots and protests were largely funded and kind of an operation. I struggle to imagine that same funding source would be interested in funding protests against Netanyahu, but I could be wrong. By the way, quick correction, for our friend, it is Julio Rosas. He was the guy that was with us on Monday.
I said Julio.
You said Jorge, but it's okay. He's he's covering the protests / riots right now, so it'll be interesting to see his coverage.
Yeah, when I look at these protests, I don't think it's uncommon, because when you look at, in general, there's so much support for the Palestinians. You might ask, where is it coming from? And I think what a lot of these protesters don't even understand is they're not even they don't understand the actual scope of the situation. They don't understand the culture there. And when you bring that here, just look at Paris, look at France, look at the crime rates in Europe, because they allow Sharia law into it. So it's opposite to Western culture and Western civilization. So when I see these protests, it's a strong indication to me that there is an infiltration and a culture war going on that, and there's a massive conflict. So it's less about Netanyahu to me. I think it's just more about what they're fighting for.
Yeah, for me, I see those people, the protesters, as like genuine revolutionaries. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but I think that they are interested in totally overthrowing the existing system, the status quo. They've been convinced through Marxist dialectic that they are on the right side of history, and they exist amongst corruption and supremacy of all types, and that it all must come crashing down. So your point about what that actually will do to the domestic population if you have open borders and totally uncontrolled migration, they don't think about that. They just say the existing paradigm is evil, therefore we must crush and collapse whatever is the kind of the Kamala Harris line of you must get away with what has been to see what will be. Like that's really how she talks. That is straight up Marxism. I know people think she's just an idiot, and she probably is, but in terms of rhetoric, she is talking like straight out of Karl Marx. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of cultural Marxism that I think is also pretty crazy to see how mainlined it is, and how a lot of people are kind of manipulated by algorithms and manipulated by the larger kind of information war that's happening out there right now, as Elon Musk is also attending the speech of Benjamin Netanyahu. And,
as his personal guest.
And Elon Musk made some very interesting comments about his donations to Donald Trump that are not happening, which was pretty fascinating to see as well here. But that's not the only crazy thing happening in Washington, D.C. today, as of course we also had hearings surrounding the head of the FBI that of course was answering questions from a lot of elected representatives that have some very serious concerns about what just transpired with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Now, unlike the head of the Secret Service, we actually found out some very interesting details from the head of the FBI about what was going on here, details that we didn't know before. But a lot of this, again, even the details that we're exposed to highlight clearly that there was something afoot here. Something definitely doesn't add up. As of course, this 20-year-old autistic-looking Harry Potter was not a wizard. He wasn't Jason Bourne. You could look at his face, and again, we try to not to show his face. We try to not to say his name so we don't spur on copycats, as of course the corporate media loves talking about all these crazy people. That inspires more crazy people. I think as independent media, we have to do something better than that. But there's questions about the young man, where he came from, what he was capable of, as we are finding out that he was using encrypting messaging apps. He had multiple phones. He had a transmitter on him. There was now 3 explosive devices. We thought there was 2. Now there's 3 of them. And he used a folding stock on his tool that allegedly was used to, of course, shoot at the President of the United States, as the FBI director also confirmed that there were 8 shots in total fired. Who did the firing? Where did the bullets come from? We still do not know, but slowly and surely we're getting a little bit of more information, And I think overall, the more information we get, the more kind of conclusion we're all kind of coming to. This is my conclusion day one, but I think the general public is realizing inside job, absolutely start to finish, and the government was complicit. The government was involved here. Now, in which levels were they involved? Because on the lower scale, you have them kind of influencing and radicalizing a lot of people through their authoritative sources, promoting a lot of Trump derangement syndrome and inspiring a lot of wackos and crazies. That's the soft way that they're doing it. There's also the lie hop. There's also the my hop, let it happen, made it happen theory. For me, I'm on the made it happen theory, especially with all the circumstantial evidence that we have here. And I think that's what we need to really keep talking about until the government proves otherwise. And again, circumstantial data, we're speculating here, but I think this is the right take to make personally. What do you guys think?
Well, just to play off the made it happen aspect, I really like the Tucker Carlson thesis on this, and we've shared his mentality on it, that because the government is actually like, yes, I do believe in jurisprudence. I do believe that you are innocent until proven guilty. As a normal citizen, of course that applies. But if you are actually tasked with protecting the former president of the United States and you fail on that, you actually have to prove that you weren't involved with that attack. Like it's not. I don't think that's a violation of your rights. I think that you had the most access. You have levels of secrecy and confidential information that we aren't privy to. So you have to prove that you weren't involved. And until you do so, I'm going to continue to assume that you were.
You know, I was going to say that if you look at the situation, it's not a normal situation in the sense that it was probably the easiest situation in the history of probably all attempts to have prevented, and they failed. They failed at preventing it. There were many Secret Service operatives that identified him several minutes before. There are literal audience members, not even Secret Service, filming this gentleman several minutes before he even fired his first shot, and nothing was done. There was no urgency. It was almost completely ignored. And you're telling me if an untrained eye, a random person that's not there to protect the president is noticing something suspicious, they have no idea what's going on. They're not trained. They just understand that something's wrong. They're even filming it, and the videos are public. And you're telling me someone who's trained specifically for the role of protecting the president couldn't do it. Obviously, that should raise many red flags. And the immediate answer might be that you have incompetent Secret Service operatives. But if they were incompetent, why were they taking pictures of them minutes, him riding his bike? Why were they taking pictures of him? They could take pictures, but they couldn't question him. They couldn't approach him. They couldn't.
This is the biggest disclosure that we got over the past 24 hours.
We broke this live yesterday. We were on the show. The video broke. We played the full video in its entirety. And Clint, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. The counter sniper team, it was not, allegedly it's not Secret Service, it was local counter sniper team, is in the second story building behind the structure, behind the building from which the actual assailant eventually fires. So they were in direct eyesight to where the sniper would have been. What happened was they saw this kid down below before he got on the roof. They see him acting weird. He's got a bunch of bags with him. He's on a bike, and they take photos of him. They send it to the Secret Service. Apparently, even though a counter sniper team, you would have to imagine, is supposed to be stationary. You would use foot soldiers to go and pursue any suspicious people. They actually pulled the local counter sniper team from the ideal location to prevent this sniper from being able to take a shot. And then as they're searching for him, this kid climbs up on that roof and takes those shots. The number one question we should be asking right now is, who gave authorization for that local sniper team to leave their station and why? Because that cannot be in standard protocol. So I think once we get that answer, you would really only need one person involved with this to pull that team from that location for this kid to be able to succeed in potentially taking out the former president of the United States. That is a huge smoking gun. We need answers on that.
Yeah, they're just taking selfies. Like, oh, look at that guy on the roof. He's having a great old time, as we found out yesterday, which is crazy. Which is absolutely insane. You're equipped with self-defense tools. You're equipped with radios, right? At least. Get the orange man off the stage now. Right?
Exactly.
Orange off now. That's probably his code name by the Secret Service. But seriously, there's too many inconsistencies to the story that don't add up and clearly do highlight larger, more sinister motives here that absolutely do implicate larger powers that be, maybe even more powerful than the Secret Service, maybe even more powerful than the FBI, that, of course, were pulling the strings and allowed this crazy event to unfold the way it did, where just by a miracle, the country is lucky it wasn't just absolutely ripped apart with this heinous act that we're still waiting to find out the whole truth about it. It's freaking crazy. But again, one of the things that I've talked about specifically on social media throughout all of this is not just all the inconsistencies, but again, you look at the face of this kid. He doesn't look like a sociopath. He doesn't look like an extremely raging individual who's capable of extreme violence. He doesn't look like particularly any kind of mastermind. He looks like someone who is impressionable. He looks like someone who is gullible. He looks, and again, impressions could be wrong. And this is just my own kind of opinion on the situation looking into this matter. But for me, looking at this, he looks like the perfect MKUltra subject. No social media history, no close friends, no real big ties to family. And
both of his parents are therapists or like involved with, psychology. I don't know. It's interesting.
So one of my very, 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 very close friends, he's discovered a lot of things about human behavior. He's one of the leading experts in the world. Dr. Phil says he's probably the best in the world at it. His name is Chase Hughes. And My buddy Chase taught me this, about 3.5 years ago, and I find it to be quite fascinating. And you look at this with all these people, all the people that do similar things and commit these atrocities. If you look at their lower eyelids, and what I would explain to you is, for example, if you look at the lower eyelid and you squint a lot, that means you're skeptical, right? So if you're listening to this, you make a skeptical face, you're constantly squinting. Someone doesn't matter how old you are, if you're constantly squinting, you're going to start to get these lines underneath your lower eyelids, and that indicates that you're a bit less receptive. Now, if you look up anyone who was in a cult, look up ex-cult members, you'll notice that there's almost no lines. It's super smooth underneath the lower eyelid. And when you look at him,
basically they never squint.
Yeah, they never go like,
They never are
no
like
skepticism.
deep in pondering.
Squinty, Quinty. I see some squints.
There's almost no skepticism.
I'm extraordinarily skeptical, so I'm sure I got some lines.
I got some squinty lines too.
No, on the side it's
none.
happiness. On the side of your eyes, that's called crow's feet. That's for happiness. But underneath,
happy?
Underneath your eyes, like right here, like where you'd have eye bags. But when you look at that and you look at these individuals, it's almost like they were part of a cult. And the reason I bring that up is because I found that if I had to rapidly pick a subject to hypnotize, and I wanted the best subject to just knock out, and they were the most receptive, it would be the person with the smoothest lower eyelids every single time. And I've done this thousands of times. And I could tell you now that, if I were looking at a subject, you look at this individual, he's very, very receptive. I can tell you right now, this guy was a very, very hypnotizable subject, probably in the top 1 percentile. It's called a somnambulist. Somnambulists usually make up about 1/3 of the population, but there's a top 1% of somnambulists who are able to enter that state instantaneously without any prep, without ever even needing to be prepared to be hypnotized, because they're already in that state.
Interesting.
And these people are so receptive to hypnosis that you put them in a state called somnambulism, which means sleepwalking. You could quite literally do anything you want to this person. And you look at the common pattern here, it's usually someone much younger before they develop, their frontal lobes, their frontal cortex is fully developed at 25. So you have someone who's still in an earlier, stage of development in their brain. They're much more receptive to suggestion. And because of that, I believe he would have been a perfect individual for it. Now, if you look at his background, this is something you should look at. He had no criminal background whatsoever. When someone's really angry, you'll notice there are 2 lines between their eyebrows, right? You make a mad face. If someone gets angry long enough or is frustrated long enough or, has that emotion arise in them long enough, you'll see these 2 lines pop up, in between their eyebrows. It's just what happens because you make that face long enough, that's what's going to happen. You'll notice, soldiers with PTSD who have a lot of anger and, tend to be more violent, tend to have that, or criminals have that, right? So when you look at this individual, he's got almost no lines in his face. He seems pretty, literally innocent. I mean, just gullible, like you said, innocent. He's even smiling here. His mouth is open. Look at his lower eyelids. Look how smooth they are. He has no lines in his forehead. I mean, he looks like a kid, literally like a baby. And, if I were him...
He looks like that South Park character, Timmy.
He does. And, if you look at him, I have very, very high skepticism that this individual had the confidence. He's not that confident. That he had the confidence and he had the know-how and the skill set to produce 3 explosive devices and plot something like this and somehow evade what is supposed to be the #1 security team in the world.
Yeah.
So to me, and he didn't do a good job. I mean, if regular people were able to spot him, he wasn't in a ridiculous building. He obviously didn't do a good job. And
they were calling him out. They're like, "Hey, he's right there. Get that guy. He's dangerous." For minutes and minutes and minutes, they kept Trump on stage. But you look at his eyes. You could tell when someone's like a hardcore criminal. You could tell when someone has violent tendencies. No criminal record on this kid, and you could see it on his face, on his eyes. There's no way he has the confidence, the kind of bravado, the kind of testosterone that most soldiers, most people who take lives usually have.
I could tell you in this picture that you're displaying, he was not yet corrupted in this picture. I could tell because you see his eyes. He's not disassociated in this picture. You could see by the pupils. You could see by the way he's squinting. You can even see by the smile. If you're in trance, your face is extremely plain. There's no mask. And you'll notice that all the muscles relax. And although his muscles and face are relaxed, it indicates that he did come from a more innocent background, right? There's no stress in his face. His facial expressions are pretty normal. There's no lines at all in his face. That indicates to me that he had a pretty loving family, and he was probably coming from a pretty good home. If both his parents were therapists, they probably were educated enough to know this is how you raise a kid.
Sure.
Right? So if you look at this guy, he's primed to be innocent enough to be manipulated. And if his parents are therapists, then now this is something that I haven't obviously done research on, but I'm willing to bet that his parents would have sent him off to a therapist or a handler because they believe in that since they're therapists. And that leaves room for a perfect opportunity for an operative to come in and manipulate this individual. Right now, in this picture, he looks a little bit different. I don't know if you see him here.
He's a bit older there. I don't know exactly how old he
Looks
is.
like
here.
a year or two later.
Yeah. So he's a bit older here. But again, imagine you go to a therapist and this guy's supposed to help you. He tells you, hey, let's do an exercise. Close your eyes. And you're this receptive and gullible. It's not that hard to build something. And if you look at, the government historically, this isn't foreign to them. They've done these things before. I mean, you look at RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, and you look at the Ambassador Hotel. Well, Sirhan went in there and supposedly assassinated him. Now, I think Sirhan did pull the trigger. I don't think he was the one who actually committed the act. But, when you look at the evidence, and there's a lot of evidence about it, I don't think Sirhan actually successfully did it. Even Robert F. Kennedy's son went and had a meeting with Sirhan, and an hour later said, this is not the man who killed my father. Now, Sirhan was 19 years old when this happened. And prior to that, he had supposedly fallen off a horse. He went up, he liked horse riding, had supposedly fallen off a horse and was seeing someone for a few weeks. And after he came back, he was very different. He was very strange. He was more disassociated. He wasn't as present. And if you look at interviews with Sirhan, this is an individual who wouldn't have harmed a fly. I mean, this is not a violent individual, but that is exactly the archetype of individual that they could pinpoint or blame this thing on. And if anything...
Yeah. And before getting too deep, there's a lot of truth to this, especially when it comes to larger kind of mind control behavioral therapies and MKUltra like studies done with therapists, done with, of course, the first thing that automatically comes to mind is what Kanye West was kind of describing when we were talking to him on Timcast, specifically about the Canadian military intel guy that was his coach that was threatening to institutionalize him, threatening to, of course, drug him up and make him someone that's going to forget his loved ones and his children that even existed, and they're going to make him into a total plant. We got the story pulled up here as his former trainer, again, scientist with Canadian military, and he's the one that was threatening to use a lot of very powerful medications on Kanye in order to, of course, stop him from speaking out about the things that he was speaking out against. So there's a lot of overlay here that's also very important.
And that dude worked for or was trained in basically a CIA operation out of Canada.
He worked in psychological operations.
Yeah, but it was like for their intelligence agency.
I mean, MKUltra, a lot of what they did happen in Canada, and they did a lot of studies outside of U.S. border. But
because it was illegal here, so they have to offshore.
And a lot of people don't realize, it's like, hey, you might be saying, well, I don't believe in these conspiracy theories. I don't believe in hypnosis. I don't believe in all that. Well, you don't have to believe in it. The government believed in it enough to spend $250 million tax dollars and years of research to do it.
Yep.
And it was so important to them, they classified it. And not only the U.S. government, the Russian government spent unbelievable amounts of money doing research on these things. And, when you look at it, I mean, without a doubt, I mean, there are interviews, there are studies, there's evidence, there are examples of people. If you go to Sirhan, you say a certain trigger word and you pinch him on the shoulder, he'll start literally pulling, an imaginary gun trigger and saying, I'm going to kill JFK. He'll write it on the journal. I mean, it is so deeply embedded into him that here we are, 50 years later.
To this day, that works?
Yeah, it still works on him.
Whoa.
50 years later. And, they've denied him for parole every time. And, there were lawyers who've tried to help him out and get him out of it. And they started getting threatened by certain individuals. So, you look at that and it's not like they're even hiding it at this point, right? They don't even care. They're just like, it doesn't matter. At this point, it's so far gone. But, we'd like to think that the government is always changing. Like, oh, we've done this. They've done this in the past, and now they're better. If anything, they get worse. They don't get better. They get worse.
Yeah, it gets more sophisticated. It
Unless
gets more
they're held
advanced.
to account. Yeah.
And there are a lot of stories of celebrities literally being sent to a lot of these therapists, and then they are completely different human beings, completely different individuals. Britney Spears, another one. A lot of Disney child stars, also major cases with them as well.
I think the latest operation
Amanda Bynes.
That's being ran. It's not actually being ran. It's unintentional, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but if you look at some of the elite boarding schools, like charter schools and things like that exist within Los Angeles and Hollywood area, where all of the stars send their kids, there's an incredibly high percentage amount of their children that are transitioning genders. I think that's something that we'll look back on and be like, oh, well, obviously they were they were I don't want to say grooming, but they were leading these kids down this path of like, you have this Hollywood parent. You're constantly being told that this is a beautiful thing and there's a process you should consider. And hey, if you're upset about XYZ in your day-to-day life, maybe you're not upset about what's happening to you. Maybe you're not upset because your mom and dad aren't home to take care of you ever. Maybe it's just because you're in the wrong body. So that's the remedy.
Yeah. Well, this is why we wanted to have you on, because you do hypnotherapy. You look for people in the crowd that have specific kind of looks, energy, faces that kind of are more manipulable, that you could kind of manipulate more yourself. And I think it's fair to say the government does that on way more kind of sophisticated levels that we don't even know about. So this is important stuff that we're absolutely talking about. But for all the newbies, for all the Kyles and Karens and the normies, some people don't even know who Sirhan was. So let's go into the kind of that history as well, which I think is absolutely critically important.
So Sirhan was a Palestinian immigrant who migrated to the United States. And, at the age of 19, he pretty much assassinated Robert F. Kennedy, or, that's what they blame him for. Now, did he have a gun in his hand? He did. But he claims that there was a woman in a polka dot dress that came by, pinched him on the shoulder, and he doesn't remember what happened afterwards. And from, key witness accounts at the time, there was a famous football player that tackled him, while he was pulling the trigger. However, they say that, there was a woman in a polka dot dress. They all saw, many witnesses saw her come up to him and like pinch him on the shoulder. And then he pulls out a gun and starts just firing, and there are 5 shots, I believe, that he could have fired in the revolver. And he just kept shooting and shooting and shooting. And, until they grabbed his hand, he just kept going, kind of like a machine. And when they ask him what happened, he has zero recollection of what has occurred. He has zero recollection. And, because of it, he's spent his entire life in prison. I believe he's in San Diego State, or San Diego, some kind of federal penitentiary there. And when you look at him, and then you look at all these other shootings that keep occurring, every time, if you were to get a guy who looks like a psychopath, clearly raging, criminal record, there's a high tendency that, someone who's already a felon, already has a violent past, has been a gang member. This is the individual that would commit something like this. But when you look at someone with zero violent history, no criminal background, they're literally a kid, and then they're responsible for, some kind of massive terror attack or an attempted assassination or anything of the sort.
One of the biggest events in recent history.
It's, in my opinion, most of the things that we see happening now, whether it'd be what happens at schools where, a lot of kids unfortunately get killed, or you look at, in general, you look at what's been going on. It's not like the person doing it makes sense. It does not make sense that these are the people doing it. These are not normal behaviors. There wasn't individuals ever that would literally go into schools and take the life of innocent children before. This is a new phenomenon that we're kind of dealing with that society never really dealt with before. And I think it's to push an agenda of gun control, because it creates fear, and it causes the most pain. But you look at the people doing it, I think they're puppets of a bigger, they're pulling strings like, hey, what if we sacrifice a few kids here or there to push this agenda so they have more control? Now, you might sit there and you'd be like, no, there's no way this is possible. I don't believe someone could just come in and influence another individual to do this. Well, you don't have to believe it. It's true. Yeah, you could look at classified documents. They've successfully created this. And there are many movies, even in Hollywood, that show you about it. Like, Jason Bourne, for example, that's a movie about it. Now, obviously, that's an extreme case, because normally when you do this, you're not getting someone who's like Jason Bourne. You're getting some kid who has very, very little knowledge. Maybe his experience is playing with like a Nerf gun or something. And they're getting him to go commit what would be, a potential assassination on, former President Trump.
Yes.
I've got an angle on this that I haven't heard.
But just really quick before you do, I want to expand on this issue, because individuals like Edward Bernays do exist in our society.
Massively.
There is mass formation hypnosis. There is the kind of fooling of gullible individuals through propaganda. Now you add that to the possibility of this happening on an extreme micro level, it makes sense, and it totally adds up, since they've been kind of mastering the act concept of mind control for a very long time. And it happens in very overt ways, but also in covert ways. So I think the women's liberation movement was another front with big tobacco that worked together in order to propagandize
big
people.
pharma.
There's a big pharma initiative as well, especially what we saw with the larger kind of health scare that the world faced
That was a big one.
through the Wuhan lab.
This is the point I wanted to get to, is that if you've ever dug deep on the OKC bombing in '94, yes, McVeigh and Terry Nichols were the perpetrators, and I do personally believe that they were definitely involved. However, there's tons of eyewitness reports that there's other people that were involved. But the reason I wanted to bring this up and contrast it with what happened with the Trump attack is that the fall guys used to be military veterans and guys that had joined militias, because the government, the FBI in particular, very much wanted to demonize any sort of right-wing militia activity in America. So they wanted to have those guys pull off that attack. There's a ton of evidence that they were involved with it. I'll leave it at that. The reason that they're no longer using military veterans is because I think that they are ramping up towards potential war with Russia or another nation. They don't want to demonize the military veterans any more than they already have, and I think that's why you would use a kid like this who's doesn't have any sort of background that would explain why is he able to build all of these bombs? Why is he able to get in this position and fire off these shots? There's no explanation. If he were a military veteran, it would be much more explainable to the American people, like, oh, he's in the military. Yeah, he probably has some capacity to build a bomb. He doesn't have any reason to be able to do that.
There's a couple things to kind of extrapolate here, because if you have someone in the military that is there and has previously taken lives, it's easy to convince him to take lives.
Right.
But I think they have ramped up their ability to mind control people where they no longer need to do that. And I think they understand the older a person is, the more of a backstory, the more people he knows, the more friends he has, the less isolated a person is compared to, of course, a loner kid who, of course, doesn't have that many friends, who doesn't have a social media, which again, if I'm like the CIA bad guy, perfect, that's the target right there. No one will be able to, of course, conclude that something's up here because he's a loner, he doesn't have any friends, he's gullible, he's more likely to, of course, be able to listen to all of us.
And on top of that, he's a registered Republican, but he's donated to Democrats, so like he's this perfect black box of like whatever you want him to be, he is. Because no one knows what he was.
But he's not a good shot.
Well, that's one thing he's not.
I think he is.
I think he was. Yeah.
I think he was.
And how did they know? Like, how do they know? Oh, this guy's gonna get him. Like, this guy's perfect, and his dad has a gun.
Because it's just an extraordinarily easy shot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a easy shot.
Yeah, Trump moved his head last second. If he didn't move his head last second, we would have been in major trouble as a country.
Yep. And here's the other thing. We still don't know that those 8 rounds were exclusively fired by him. There's a ton of audio evidence that makes it sound as if there's at least 3 locations of where guns are being fired. What's that?
Who's the Maxwell guy? Like, there was this other guy this whole time before Crooks, and they're showing like 2 different shooters.
Yeah, apparently I've only looked into this very little, so I don't want to speak with any sort of authority on it. But there was these 2 guys that were arrested for protesting, I guess, Trump in Pittsburgh, I think. So it was some issue prior to this actual attack, and a lot of people think that the man who's actually deceased on that roof is not the guy that they're claiming it is. I still haven't seen enough evidence to be convinced that he was involved. I don't know.
But Marcel, there's multiple layers of propaganda. There's multiple layers of mass formation hypnosis. What's your understanding and historical knowledge of its kind of progression? Because the first thing that I think about is Edward Bernays.
Yes.
Does it precede that, or what's the context?
If you look at Edward Bernays and you want to talk about a direct relative to him, and he's a direct relative to Sigmund Freud, but a direct relative to him as well is the CEO of Netflix, right?
Yep.
And, when you look at propaganda, for those of you who don't know who Edward Bernays is, he was able to make women start smoking almost instantaneously, made it a massive thing. That's what he's very notably famous for. Another thing is, if you have bacon in the morning for breakfast, they had all this excess pig fat at farms, and they wanted to find a way to sell it. He came up with a way to make bacon normal, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, bacon's part of a breakfast food. It's a healthy food. And within 1 week, not using Twitter or TV, just using radio, everyone was having bacon all over the country within 7 days. So if a man can do that,
The same with orange juice. They had way too much oranges. They didn't know what to do with it. And then the same with engine lubricant. They had a lot of engine lubricant after World War II, and they were like, what do we do with it? Let's put it in the food supply. And that's exactly what they did as well.
I mean, he's brilliant. And to him, it was all about how do we create this. Now, I believe that they're not as good as they were when he was around. And I'll tell you why I think that. Although, maybe they have more data and more knowledge, they're definitely not as talented at this. And I'll tell you why. I don't know if you remember several months ago, they tried to pull the, hey, we found an alien in Mexico, right? And the story just didn't gain any traction whatsoever. Everyone's like, yeah, whatever. They thought everyone would freak out and religion would collapse and whatever, and nothing happened. So, they had a plan for that. They have pretty advanced lasers. They can create actual projections in the sky. They can actually do this. It's a technology they have. And it could look like there's an actual alien invasion. And they're like, well, this isn't, I think Operation Blue Beam or whatever is what it's called. They have so many of these conspiracies that they have planned, and some of them they take into action, some of them they don't, but they test the waters, and depending on what people bite onto is kind of what they go with. Now, when you look at what they're doing here, they've been priming us to make it normal, and that's the biggest thing you have to look at. It's how do you create a new normal, right? They even use this terminology, back in 2020, the new normal. The new normal is really priming you to think it's normal to have these mass shooters or to have these violent individuals that are young kids. It's not normal. It's not normal behavior. As a matter of fact, even his parents supposedly called the police and filed a missing kid report 20 minutes later because they're like, where did my kid go?
Saying that they were concerned about him.
Yeah,
we still don't know the full details of that call.
Yeah.
But they were literally calling the authorities.
And his parents have lawyered up. There was a journalist that approached his father just last night, and he said, look, we're not going to be speaking until we have advice of an attorney. So clearly they're concerned about being held liable for the actions of their son, which is very interesting.
Normally in situations like this, the parents are the first ones to go or the relative or guardian. So I don't know why in this situation that did not happen. And they normally do that because they don't want any mishaps or leaks. But it looks like the person in charge of this mission is clearly incompetent and has made many mistakes in this situation and didn't make themselves look, good. Also,
it was a DEI hired MKUltra CIA agent that ran the whole operation.
Well, I would actually
and just cut corners and was lazy and just didn't fully do the job.
I would actually like
the old white guy, CIA MKUltra agent guy that used to do it, right?
Yeah, I would like to get full explanation as to why you think they're not as good as they used to be. Because from my vantage point, it's primarily just because they're enormous, the bureaucracy, they've gotten lazy, gotten stupid, but also I think that the American public has realized they've been lied to for so many decades that it's increasingly challenging to get us to buy whatever they want us to buy.
So the number one thing in all persuasion is credibility.
Exactly. They
and
lack
rapport,
that.
and trust. And if you don't have trust, you could look at it in your personal relationships. If someone betrays your trust, you're not going to really listen to them, and you're not going to trust whatever it is they say, even if it is the truth, right? So if someone breaks your trust once, you look at any trial, the whole point of a trial is to try and get a witness to have one discrepancy, and then you could dismiss the witness, right? So when you look at what's going on here, I think that in the past, we used to trust the media blindly. Even 10 years ago, we would trust the media blindly, right? Most people. So when you look at what's going on here, there is zero trust in the media whatsoever. No one trusts what they hear whatsoever. And because of that, you also have to realize in the last decade, we've blown up on social media. And social media has become the new media. So they're not accounting for the fact that they're almost overestimating how much credibility CNN might have or how much credibility their own news networks might have. Yep. And they're underestimating the fact that someone could pull out their phone now and have a camera that's better than the cameras we had that were, $100,000 10 years ago and get shots of what's going on and from 80 different angles. And then everyone could post it and share it. And thank God for, Twitter now or X, because it's not censored and it's a very popular platform, which allows us to see all these things and it uncovers the truth. And it's causing a lot of problems. These older individuals in Congress haven't quite picked up the fact that, hey, social media is a bit different than what you think it is, and it's got a lot more power. I think they constantly undervalue or underestimate what it can do.
I think it's a bifurcation in society where the gullible people are more gullible than ever, but the people paying attention are more adverse to it than ever as well, because there have been psychological studies from Facebook literally manipulating the algorithm to see what kind of emotions they could evoke out of you. And this is stuff that they were doing 15 years ago. Imagine the capabilities, imagine the advanced stuff that they have right now that they coordinate with Facebook, with Instagram, with all these other social media platforms, where they're able to tune in feelings and emotions and facts to mind warp you in a specific way to believe certain issues and things. So I think I agree with you. There's a lot of people pushing back on it, but there's also a large subsection of people that are more hooked in than ever, especially when it comes to the NPC state-run propaganda. And that's the kind of advancement of this kind of mind control that we're seeing here. I'm going to let you respond to that, Marcel, but I also want to ask you, what do you think exactly happened here with this guy? If you were the DEI secret CIA MKUltra agent, what do you think happened here from start to finish with this young man? And before doing that, Steph, let's read the super chats. Not all of them. Only read the last one on Telegram and the one on YouTube. The other ones are a little bit too spicy, and we're going to have to save them for the next platform.
All right, got you. So we have Andrew Jacobs saying, Luke, I'll do that fact check job for free /Biltong. Okay.
Thank you, Andrew Jacobs. Yeah, DM me on Twitter at LukeWeAreChange. Keep going.
We got I'm Not Your Buddy Guy saying, great guest. Glad you're enlightening and educating your audience. More need to know about this. Also, did you hear about his mobile data revealing someone from DC visiting crooks?
Yes, we have that. It's still a little bit kind of inconclusive. The Blaze was reporting on it as they wrote an article that's titled "Phone Associated with Would-Be Assassin Pinged Near FBI DC Offices in 2023." Now, again, this doesn't say a lot. He could have been on a field trip. He could have been walking by. We don't know. And again, the job is for the government to answer these questions, not for us to know what happens here. It's for us to pressure them to give us answers. So, Marcel, I don't know if you want to answer what I just said or that larger question about start to finish here.
So start to finish, I'll respond to that. It's not that hard. If someone had 45 minutes with this individual, they could do the job. If someone had more time with them, they could do the job more thoroughly. For example, training, hey, come to this thing. Now meet me at this location. Leave your phone. Meet me here at this time. Like, once you've already built the thing in this guy's head and you've already created that process, right? All you have to do is have a guidance counselor, someone they trust, someone they look up to, a mentor, a therapist, whatever. Someone that could have them in a room alone for half an hour to an hour. And, it would make sense in the context of, hey, I'm going to go see this person today, right? And everyone would be okay with that. Parents would be okay with that. Everyone would be okay with that. It's just a normal thing. It's in the context that would make sense to anyone. No one would raise eyebrows. They'd come in. They'd do the process, and then he'd go on with his life because it's kind of running in the background. And then, then they come in, hey, come meet me here. They go to a shooting range or something, and then all of a sudden you have him practicing, his marksmanship, and then you have him practicing, certain things. And, when you look at the explosive devices, I don't think he built them. In my opinion, it's not so simple to build that. I don't think he went and shopped around. I think they just planted it and they're saying, oh yeah, we found these things there, and everyone believes it. I would question everything they say. But, from start to finish, he probably had someone that he was seeing, someone he trusted, someone maybe his parents trusted, maybe it was in secret, maybe not. They did this thing. Maybe they had 6 months leading up to it because they wanted it to go right. But there are many people like this individual. He's not the only one. And they probably have, 50 different options. And what, this would probably be the best. This guy's the most qualified. He's the most receptive. We could turn this thing on whenever we want. And then they used it. Told them, hey, this is what you're doing on this day at this time. Probably people on the inside were like, hey, this guy's going to be on this building at this time, part of the plan. We're going to move these things around. Oh, hey, and they're so incompetent that, the other snipers that you were saying were sitting there and they're taking pictures of them like, oh, yeah, hey, move, don't go there, right? They're so incompetent that they couldn't even understand the full scope of the plan, couldn't realize that there'd be a lot of spectators at clear sight with their phones at that area. Whoever was masterminding this was clearly an idiot. I wouldn't say that it's one person. I would say it's many, 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 many individuals. And the person responsible for installing this thing into this kid's psychology is not the person also responsible for the plan and the execution of the entire thing. Their entire job was probably just to create the psychology necessary to get him to take these actions. Right. And when you look at the entire context, I would say it's, if you were to ask me how easy is it to make someone do this, On a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being very hard, 1 being very easy, I would say it's a 1.5. And people think it's a lot harder to do. It's really not that hard to do. On a mass scale, what this looks like is, hey, look at October 7th in Israel. Hamas comes in there's no way they could have come in on normal terms. There was clearly something at play here, where they come in. If a grasshopper hops on the border wall, there would be military there ahead of time.
And the defenses stood down, and they took a long time to react.
Yeah, not only that, they also, you have to look at their prior history where they're able to spot tunnels with 30,000 or 16,000 Hamas walking in, and they wait for everyone to come in, and then they blow up the tunnel and kill everyone inside. But yet you're letting these people come in on power paragliders. When you have a full-blown Air Force and rockets and sophisticated military, you're having people come on slow dinghies. When you have a full-blown Navy, you're having people come in on old pickup trucks and outdated Jeeps with guns on the back.
And it's not even that you just let them in. You also gave them 7 hours to create as much havoc as possible.
Yep,
because they didn't engage for like 6-7 hours.
There were civilians coming together, defending themselves faster than, of course, the military, which speaks volumes to what happened that day. Yeah.
And when you look at exactly what happened there, right now you had there was a lot of division going on in Israel at the time. A year ago, a year ago from now, there was protests with 30,000 people in the middle of the street, calling for Netanyahu to step down.
Yep.
So you're looking at what's going on there. And then suddenly you have something like this. Well, now you have an entire country rallying behind each other to go to war, right? To go kill. So you're talking about a mass scale. Yeah, there's got to be a little bit more pain to get everyone on board, right? The propaganda's got to hurt a little bit more. Oh, we're used to rockets being fired. But what they're not used to is everyone, it's a small country. Everyone knows everyone. As someone knows someone who's been killed, or maybe it's been directly, or maybe, it's your son, your father, your friend, your cousin. So you look at
1,000 people to an Israeli population is a lot of people.
Percentage-wise, it's massive, right? 1,400 people, and then all these people were kidnapped, who are probably almost all dead as well.
But we'll talk more about that specific issue on the next platform.
Yeah.
This platform doesn't like conversations about that. But let's finish off about this kind of shooter here, the psychology here, and the mind control.
Yeah, long story short, for those of you who are skeptical that you can get someone to do something, in this situation, if you look at the context there, obviously an entire country can rally behind something. Then you can obviously get one person who's very, very, very receptive to do it. And more importantly, you have to realize how this would work. This wouldn't work by saying, hey, you are you, and now you as an individual are going to go take this act. A lot of you might be thinking, like, within his current paradigm, he might just have been motivated and this is him. It's actually not him. It's a completely different identity that they install into his mind. It's almost kind of like when you log into a computer, it says your name and then it says guest user.
Yep, they do this with MKUltra. They create trauma, so they create split personalities of individuals who are having a hard time dealing with the trauma, so they create alternative personalities to better deal with the pain and suffering that they're causing them.
Yeah, so it used to be called multiple personality disorder. It's currently called dissociative identity disorder.
And it happens to a lot of people that deal with very significant trauma.
Yeah, so they accidentally discovered that you can induce DID through hypnosis.
Trauma-based mind control.
Yes. Yep. So what happens is they put you through a trauma response. And the reason this is very important to note is because if I were to hypnotize you like I did last time, you rushed to the gym, you didn't want to smoke, but we didn't create a new neural pathway necessarily because it was very quick, it was short. If you go through something traumatic, this is the only context in which a neural pathway doesn't take 6 to 8 months, or you have electrodes attached to someone's brain and electricity. You amp the electricity in the brain, allowing it to create more electrodes. Right? So assuming that you don't have electricity or electrodes in the brain, and you also don't have 6 to 8 months to prime someone, well, there's only one way to instantaneously physiologically change the brain, and it's through the amygdala, which is the part of the brain responsible for trauma. And if you induce a trauma response, instantaneously you physiologically change the hardware in the brain, and now you can continuously re-trigger whatever it is you're doing. So
and you need constant repetition, and this is why last time you were here I told Clint, hey, download the part where you got hypnotized, listen to it again, meditate and listen over and over and over again, which you didn't do.
I didn't do that.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll give you something more powerful this time, which kind of plays onto the pathways you already have.
Okay.
But back to this specific thing, when you're talking about DID, dissociative identity disorder, what you're doing is you're creating a trauma response that creates a second identity. So you leave your current identity, every memory you have, everything you do, you completely disassociate from it. You move into an alternate reality. This happens to younger people when they go through extreme trauma. When they're young, they witness something absolutely horrible. A lot of psychopaths actually end up inside of DID. Usually when it happens organically, because you've been traumatized as a young kid, you go into a violent place. Now, there are many ways for the brain to deal with trauma. You got borderline personality disorder. That's a trauma response. You got post-traumatic stress disorder, sociopathic behavior. All of that is usually a trauma response from a young age. Now, the problem with DID is it's so different than what people think. So a lot of people who have DID, right, dissociative identity disorder, you could have glaucoma in one personality, be blind, and another one not be. You could be diabetic in one personality and not be in another one. You can have high blood pressure in one and not in the other, right? So you can have an addiction in one and not in the other. People think, a lot of people who are uneducated on mental health think that's schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is hallucinations. DID is multiple personalities. Now, usually you have one personality, not, like the movie Split came out with, I think, like 18 or 20 personalities. Very rare for that to happen because they don't get along. Personalities fight each other, right? So usually when this happens, you take an innocent kid, one identity, one personality, you use some kind of trauma response. You get them to go through something horrific or, scary or, traumatic, even physiologically traumatic in hypnosis. And then you split the personality. You then program the new personality. You create a trigger. You fire off that trigger. You've programmed it to have instructions, do whatever this person says. And now once you've created that, you also have to realize whoever's setting off that trigger, whatever the trigger is, pinching someone on the shoulder like SIRHAN, or polka dot dress, or whatever it might be. And at this point, the triggers could be significantly higher than or more advanced. In this regard, it can be, right? There could be signals, there could be sounds, there could be certain things that they did, environments, times, right? They could be wearing a watch, and when it hits this time, the trigger goes off. There's so many different things you could do. Anyways, then now they follow instructions and they go into that state. So it's very easy to create it, especially if you have a lot of time. And a lot of time really could just be a week. You only need even less than a week, and you can get this to be perfect. Wow. So,
real quick question for you.
Yeah.
If this is true, and if this is what happened, this kid's not a good example because he's no longer alive. But say like Sirhan, how would you prove that you are not responsible for your actions, that you were under hypnosis, under control?
You would literally get him to do whatever you wanted. You would get someone like me to come in there, hypnotize him, and prove the point.
Okay.
And you would not, and you would make it, you would show everybody, hey, he's not going to know what we're doing here, but we're going to set off a trigger, and he's going to do something that would harm himself, that would harm him. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, hey, that's going to be water, it's going to be acid, and when I say this word, you're going to throw it in your face.
Gotcha.
And then you have, it's water. They don't know that. They think it's acid. You show them, acid. You switch it. It's called an acid test, and then you say the word, and they throw it in your face. Okay, if they're able to cause self-harm at that level, what else would they be?
They're capable of anything.
Exactly.
That point. Yeah.
Exactly. The brain is an extremely powerful force, and it works in very mysterious ways. But the modern science doesn't understand it. But I think there's a section of this mind control unit that figured it out. They figured out the code. And, they used hypnosis on us already. Why wouldn't they do it on an individual extreme level for their own kind of larger, sinister purposes and agenda here? And I think this is why we're even having major Democrats coming out and saying, hey, we really need answers here. AOC is questioning the head of Secret Service in a very aggressive way, which is surprising, as we also have this article from Fox News talking about how a top Democrat who visited Butler says local officials told him, quote, we need to talk more about the Secret Service failures here, as even a lot of Democrats are expressing official deep concern about these, quote, security failures. And in my opinion, they weren't failures.
Yeah, I was going to say, The only failure was that he missed.
Exactly.
That was the failure. That went according to plan. It didn't, and think about the propaganda. This is probably what they were thinking, if you want to be logical. If they were successful, no one would be looking at all the other footage. They wouldn't be playing the footage of, hey, how'd that guy get on the roof? That wouldn't even be on the media.
Exactly.
So, but because they failed, they have to spin it differently. And that's exactly why you're seeing all these things all over the place.
Yeah, and we want to talk about that. I released a video for members of LoveLukeUnfiltered.com detailing in great, detail specifically what would have happened if the bullet would have made its trajectory, what would have happened to this country, as of course already this country is on edge. I think a lot of people are being mind warped to hate each other, and I want to talk about that specifically with the larger topic of civil war on the next platform that we are going to be going to and continuing this conversation in a more unfiltered, totally free way. We also want to talk about how, hypnosis and mind control. There's ways to, of course, use it for negative purposes, but there's also things that you could do that could actually greatly benefit individuals, especially troubled individuals who are dealing with problems. Because once you kind of master the art of mind control, there's many different ways and directions you could take it in. And there are individuals working towards helping individuals through, of course, hypnosis and other things that we're going to be talking about on the next platform, which, of course, we are currently on the front page of. All you have to do is go to this specific platform, go there, and we are right here in the right-hand corner of that specific website where the conversation will continue and get a lot spicier. I thought already the conversation is extremely important, and the details that we're getting into, I haven't seen anywhere else. The dots kind of largely connected with the historical context, the scientific aspects of it, which I think are critically freaking important. We go deeper down the rabbit hole on this next platform. Before going there, Marcel, give us your plugins, and I think you want to say something too.
Yeah, so my plugins are Marcel Klein. My name's spelled with a Z, so it's spelled Marcel, but Marcel Klein. If you just look up Marcel Klein Hypnosis, like Calvin Klein, I'll pop up. And the last thing I want to say here is, a lot of you might be wondering, like, hey, how do I protect myself against this propaganda and against this? And that's what we're going to be getting into on the other platform. So definitely follow along. What I will say is the most powerful tool in the world is hypnosis. That's why the government uses it religiously for things like this. And that's the only tool they depend on. But you can use this for any area of your life. If you want to make more money, if you want to improve your relationships, you want to get over your insecurities, overcome your fear, not be stressed out. In general, if you can do that and you can master your mindset, this is the most powerful tool in the world. I have some Fortune 500 CEOs come up to me, Jake Paul, someone I work with, and you look at them, the most successful people in the world, they use this. So, you look at Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson says that the reason he is so successul is because his trainer used to hypnotize him to go into the,
And the same for Conor McGregor. The same for Michael Jordan. Yep. Costamoto was a hypnotist. And he was literally hypnotizing Mike Tyson since he was a child to be an absolute destroyer of man. But he didn't teach him how to, of course, not to do that and control his emotions, which led to, of course, ultimately his prison sentence, his kind of demise, which he's making his way out of. Mike Tyson, fascinating individual. We're going to try to reach out to him to have him on the show because I think that would be a fact. And if he comes on, I would love to have you on to talk about that.
I'd fly out for that.
So we'll try to set that up. If anyone has a contact,
Mike Tyson on this show,
you will get tasered three times.
I am going to die a happy man. That is, for people of my age, that is the guy. It would be unbelievable to talk to Mike.
There's probably someone watching that could help us set it up. So if you know that person, DM me at Luke We Are Change. We would love to make that happen, but I have other ways we can make that happen as well. So it should be interesting. So at Marcel Klein.
At Marcel Klein on YouTube, at Marcel on Instagram. And by the way, anyone watching, if you guys want a free hypnosis audio, that'll help you with your success. Just DM me the word hypnosis on Instagram at Marcel, MARCZELL, MARCZ as in zebra, ELL. Just DM me the word hypnosis. My team will get back to you almost immediately and get you access to that audio.
Awesome.
I'm impetuous. My style is impregnable. You can't touch me.
And you're also doing a seminar here in Miami.
I'm doing a seminar here in Miami, Thursday to Sunday. For those of you interested in attending and you want to learn a lot of this stuff, it's a pretty long event, but we're almost sold out. So if you're interested in that, just make sure you DM me saying, hey, I want to come to the seminar. And if you can't make it out in person, you want to watch it on Zoom, we can also offer that as well. Just clarify on the DMs on Instagram, and I will help you guys get your ticket.
Awesome. At Liberty Lockpod on X, we are exactly 100 subscribers on Liberty Lockdown on YouTube from 20K. So if you guys could please help me out and go subscribe to Liberty Lockdown, putting out some great episodes over there too. And while you're at it, pick up your RSS, whatever your podcatcher is on whatever your favorite device is to listen to shows. Make sure you search for The Best Political Show as well as Liberty Lockdown and subscribe so you never miss an episode. That's it. Steph, We Are Change.
Steph We Are Change. You can find me on Instagram at Steph We Are Change or on X at StephWRC.
All right. It looks like we already have a caller from a member of LukeUnfiltered.com that, of course, we will be going to in about 30 minutes. I have a particularly spicy video to start off this next